Hello everyone, my name is Subroto Saha and today I am going to discuss about the independent suspension or the coil spring. Coil spring is basically one kind of independent suspension system. As we learned earlier that the dependent suspension system like leaf spring. Okay, now today we are learning on the coil spring. All of you have seen the coil spring in the different kind of vehicles or railways. So it's basically the coil. Okay, and this spring is finds its application with always independent type of suspension. Okay, and due to the absence of the interplate frictions, and some manufacturers have used it for the rear suspension and some of the front suspensions. Coil and torsion bar springs are superior to the leaf spring so far as the energy storage is concerned. When we store the energy, it is more efficient for a coil spring. The leaf spring, however, it performs several functions for which there are other types require the extra members, causing an additions to the basic weight as well as the complication to the system also. And one more thing, the system and the weight is main concern, and obviously the costing is also increased in case of leaf spring type of suspension system. But in case of coil spring suspension, the space required is very less and weight is also very less, and you can absorb the energy within the suspension system. And one more thing, obviously the costing is also reduced in case of the coil spring suspension systems, okay, or independent type of suspension systems. The rate of the helical spring depends on the length and the diameter of the coil. Obviously this is the coil spring, you can see here. This coil spring characteristics or the performance is totally depends on the length and the diameter of the coil spring. If we increase the length or increase the diameter, then obviously it will absorb more energy. Okay, the coil wear or the coil is wound in the form of a coil. The length is governed by the diameter of the coil, and the number of active turns is also important. Length increase means the number of turn is also increased. Okay, that's why I am telling length as well as the number of turns. So if we increase the length or the increase the length of the coil spring or number of turns is almost depend on the length of the coil. But in case when we increase the length but fix the number of turns, what will happen? The gap in between two turns will be increased. In that case, the spring performance is obviously decreased. So if we want to increase our length, then obviously we have to increase our number of effective turns also. Here you can see the two suspension systems of coil spring. One is for rear suspension system, another is for the front suspension systems. It is also a front suspension system. You can see here this wishbone arm, two wishbone arms, that is upper wishbone arms, that is upper control arm or upper wishbone arms, and this is the lower wishbone arm or the lower control arm. So in between two control arm or wishbone arm, the manufacturers are used to place a coil spring in between the two arms. Okay, so this is the basically functions of coil spring in front suspension systems. So you can use this coil spring also the McPherson start type suspension systems. So in the telescopic suspension system, basically telescopic suspension systems are used in two-wheelers, and most popular suspension system in two-wheeler systems. And the McPherson start is also used in some passenger cars like Maruti company's car, Maruti 800 or like that. So in that case the starts are assembled with the coil or the spring so that it can perform very smoothly. But the McPherson start, as compared to the only coil spring suspension system, is weight is increased in case of McPherson start type of suspension system. Now we are discussing on the this front and the rear and the front type of suspension. Here you can see that the upper wishbone and lower wishbone, in between two wishbone we are using a telescopic. You can see here, this is the telescopic shock absorber. A telescope is placed in between in between a coil spring. You can use only coil spring or telescopic shock absorber with coil spring in front suspension system. Basically such kind of suspension system are used in sports car. Okay, now so the if a front wheel drive car, the helical spring are commonly used to support the rear dead axles. You can see from the figure that a layout which is the spring acts directly on the axles. Axle location at the top and the bottom is provided by the top mounting of the damper or the shock absorber, like telescopic shock absorber, and the trailing arm. Besides providing force and the earth stiffness, the lower arm together with the damper tube which absorbs the braking torque also. A pan rod or tie rod resists the lateral movement of the axle. In the next class we will discuss on the torsion bar also. The tie rod is used a rubber bush at the both end for bolting to the axle and the body. On high performance car, a rear stabilizer bar is often installed to balance the vehicle and also reduce to the rolling rolling tendency of the vehicle due to the while taking a turn of a vehicle. So you have to reduce this rolling tendency of the car, because if you don't want to reduce the rolling effect, then your car will roll out and that will cause a accident. So to reduce this rolling effect, we can use the stabilizer bar at the front of the vehicle, but in case of some vehicles we are using this stabilizer bar also rear axles also. So this suspension is the front, this coil spring suspension of the front wheel vehicles or in the front system. These are the drawings. And you can see here, this is the stabilizer assembly. One more thing, so there are many ball joints are used in front portion of a car, like in steering system and in suspension system. You can see here this upper wishbone and lower wishbone are joined by the ball joint. So this ball joint is also very important for front portion of a car, or maximum joints of the front portion are done by the ball joint. Okay, so this is the coil spring type of suspension. Okay, and this is one type of independent suspension system. Why it's independent suspension system? Because separate control arm type of suspension for each front wheels, which allows for movement of one front wheel without affecting the another front wheels. So both wheels can move independently, and when one wheel is moving or moving independently, at that time the another wheels doesn't affect by the other wheels. So that's why it's called the independent type of suspension system. And coil spring is one type of independent suspension system. It can move up and down without the helping of the another wheels. And the coil spring is basically the it's a spring type, not like the leaf spring. It's a helical spring, and it is the specification on the and the characteristics of this leaf spring depends on the number of turns, length, and the diameter of the spring. This is the coil spring, and this type of coil spring are basically used in front suspension systems and in rear suspension system, very rare case of use this helical suspension system in rear. Almost the leaf spring or dependent type of suspension system are used in the rear wheels for the passenger and the commercial vehicles. But in commercial vehicle, all both front and rear, both cases we are using the leaf spring. But in case of passengers car, we are using the leaf spring at the rear, and in front case, in front portion, we are using the coil spring or the wishbone arm combination. But some of the car are using the MacPherson start-up suspension system, which also consists of the coil spring and the starts. So in that case, the coil spring is also used in the rear suspension also. In case of two-wheeler, we are using the telescopic shock absorber, which is also combination of the coil spring and also telescopic shock absorber, means telescopic shock absorber with coil spring. So such kind of suspension system is also very popular in two-wheeler segments. Now this is the part of the suspension system, and it is the coil spring suspension system, one kind of independent suspension system. Okay. This wishbones means upper wishbone and lower wishbone arm suspension system is also the independent type of suspension system. These wishbone arm suspension systems are basically used in racing cars. Okay. So this is our coil spring suspension system. So in next video we'll discuss about the MacPherson start and wishbone arm and also the torsion bar also. Okay, thank you.